Have you ever noticed, as you lie awake at night, that the thing you are most afraid of is not the world outside, but the world inside yourself? The shadows you try to avoid. The thoughts you call dark, the impulses you label as shameful or dangerous, these are not strangers. They are the very companions of your existence, the hidden dancers in the hall of your mind, whispering truths you have yet to hear. And in this avoidance, in this trembling away from what you most fear, you miss the fundamental point that the self you fear is not something separate from you. It is precisely the self you are. Imagine, if you will, a vast ocean, so deep and dark that the surface seems like a thin, fragile mirror. On the surface, we float in little boats, content with the sunlight and the gentle lapping of waves. But below, in the depths, the ocean roils with currents we cannot see, creatures we cannot name, mysteries that terrify us. And yet, this ocean is not something apart from the boat. It is the very substance of the water in which the boat floats. To fear the depths is to fear the very medium of your being. And yet, that is what we do every day. We construct these boats of identity, fragile, painted, decorated, and we cling to them as though they were ourselves, while beneath the dark waters churn, whispering, "I am you, and you cannot escape me." We are told in every manner of polite society that the self is what we present, our manners, our professions, our tidy little ambitions. And then, in secret, there is a part that rebels, that desires, that rages, that cries. This part we hide. We call it ego, we call it shadow, we call it seen. But whatever the label, the fact remains. It is inseparable from us. To deny it is like denying the existence of gravity because you do not wish to fall. Yet what is fear, if not the awareness of a truth we are reluctant to face? Consider the child who trembles at the dark. The child does not wish to understand it intellectually. The child merely senses that something immense and alive resides there, something that could swallow him whole. But as the child grows, he is told to be brave, to suppress the trembling, to illuminate and sanitize the dark until it no longer frightens. And what becomes of the child? He grows into an adult who fears his own impulses, who fears the passions that make him fully alive. Yet the dark is not to be conquered. It is not an enemy. It is the very soil from which the brightness of your life springs. To embrace it is not to be consumed by it. It is to recognize that you have been dancing with it all along. Think of your life as a music you are learning to play. The notes you love, the melodies you sing with confidence. These are only half the music. The pauses, the dissonances, the notes you fumble over, these are just as essential. In fact, they are the music itself. To fear the wrong note is to fear the song. And so it is with the self. The impulses you find shameful, the desires that make you uncomfortable, the thoughts that seem alien, these are not intruders. They are the music of your being. Only when you stop running, only when you stop labeling, only when you allow yourself to hear even the parts you dislike, does the music become whole. And here is a paradox. The more you resist this feared self, the more it grows in your imagination. It becomes a shadow looming over your life, a dark cloud that blocks the sun. But the moment you turn toward it, the moment you say, "Yes, there you are, and here I am," something remarkable occurs. The fear, once enormous, begins to shrink, not because it has gone, but because it has been recognized. Like a wild animal that no longer hides from the light, it relaxes, and you see that it is not outside you. It never was. It is you in all your jagged, untamed, magnificent reality. In practical terms, this means that you cannot improve yourself by chasing some distant ideal of perfection, some sanitized image of what is safe or acceptable. You improve, or more precisely, you awaken by attending to the self that you have most feared, by bringing light to the shadow, by leaning into the discomfort, by allowing yourself to meet the uninvited guest in your own house. And in doing so, you discover something astonishing, that self is not monstrous. It is alive, it is vibrant, it is the source of creativity, spontaneity, and delight that your polite, careful self could never reach on its own. The great irony is that in fearing yourself, you have been attempting to flee from your own life. You have been trying to escape the very being you are, as though you could abandon the body you inhabit, or the mind that dreams you awake each morning. But there is nowhere to flee. There is only the invitation to dance with yourself in all your complexity, in all your contradiction, in all your magnificence. And so, my friends, we begin to see the first glimmer of understanding. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is a guide. It points, with trembling finger, to the very territory where the self is hiding from itself. What is courage, then, if not simply the willingness to meet that self, to greet the darkened room of your own heart, and to say, I see you, you are me, and together we shall move forward. And when you begin to meet yourself in this way, you notice a curious thing. The self you feared so desperately is not rigid, not fixed, not an unchangeable monster. It is fluid, alive, like smoke curling in sunlight, like water running over stones, like a melody that changes as it moves through the air. And the more attention you give it, the less it resists, the more it reveals its subtle beauty. For what is fear but a story we tell ourselves, a shadow cast upon the walls of a cave? And what happens when we turn the torch toward the shadow? We see that it dances in response, yes, but it dances because it is part of the same flame, part of the same movement that illuminates the cave itself. Let us think for a moment about the way the universe works. There is no absolute light, no absolute dark. There is only play, only interplay, only the ebb and flow of forces that seem opposed but are in truth complementary. The night sky, for instance, is not dark because light is absent. It is dark because it holds the possibility of stars, and yourself is exactly the same. The part you fear is not evil, not corrupt, not broken. It is the shadow that shapes your contours, the tension that gives your life its form, the contrast that allows your consciousness to emerge. To reject it is to deny the very shape of your own existence. You see, the human mind has a peculiar habit. It imagines that life is a drama with clearly defined heroes and villains, that the self should always be noble, always triumphant, always composed. And yet, life is more like jazz than it is like a carefully plotted play. Improvisation is the rule, not the exception. And in improvisation, there are mistakes. There are moments of discord, of disharmony, of surprise. There are notes that startle and others that delight. And in the same way, yourself is not a static character. It is a dynamic unfolding, a music that cannot be captured in a single notation. The part you fear is simply an essential motif, waiting for recognition. Now, consider the metaphor of the snake. Many of us live as though a venomous snake lurks within our hearts, coiled and ready to strike. We arm ourselves, we barricade our doors, we suppress and deny. And so we come to a practice, not of discipline, not of coercion, but of intimate attention. When fear rises, when the self you most wish to escape manifests in anger, in jealousy, in lust, in despair, do not turn away. Pause, breathe, notice. Do not judge. Watch the thought, the feeling, the impulse, as though it were a cloud passing across the sky, and then, gently, say to it, yes, you are here. You are part of me, and I am part of you. This is not an intellectual exercise. It is a recognition, a meeting, a moment of profound reconciliation. In practical terms, this might appear in small ways. Perhaps you catch yourself in envy, and instead of hiding it, you trace its roots, see where it comes from, understand what it tells you about your longing, your desire, your unmet needs. Perhaps you feel anger toward another, and instead of suppressing it, you allow it to speak, to reveal the truth of your boundaries and your expectations. Perhaps you feel shame, and instead of shrinking, you feel its texture, its weight, its place in your narrative. In every instance, the feared self is a guidepost, pointing to the living, breathing reality of who you are beneath the superficial self you present to the world. And in this engagement, something miraculous occurs. You discover that the feared self is not a source of weakness, but a font of strength. You discover that the impulses you thought dangerous are precisely what grant you vitality. You discover that the chaotic, untamed, unruly parts of your being are the very elements that allow you to love fully, create freely, and experience life with the intensity it deserves. For when you have embraced even the parts of yourself that once terrified you, you are no longer divided. You are whole. And in wholeness, fear itself begins to lose its power. It is worth noting, too, that this journey is not a linear path. You will stumble. You will retreat. You will encounter parts of yourself so strange, so wild, so foreign, that it will take months, years even, to make peace with them. And yet, even in stumbling, there is learning. Even in retreat, there is understanding. For every time you return to the self you fear, you illuminate it a little more, soften its edges, integrate its music into your own, and gradually, the terror fades. Not because the self has changed, no. It remains vivid and robust because your perception has shifted. You no longer stand in opposition, you stand in recognition. Now, imagine a mirror, but not a mirror in which you simply see the reflection. You recognize the tidy, familiar face. No, imagine a mirror that reflects every shadow, every wrinkle, every impulse you've tried to hide from yourself. At first, it is terrifying. You see the greed, the lust, the envy, the cowardice, and you feel as though some monstrous version of yourself is staring back. And yet, if you dare to look longer, something astonishing happens. You begin to see the pattern, the coherence, the intricate design that underlies it all. The shadow is no longer a separate entity. A foreign invader, it is your own being, expressed in a form you can now acknowledge. You recognize that it is precisely because of these flaws that you are alive, dynamic, unpredictable. They are not mistakes. They are signals of life moving through you. There is a story I like to tell. Perhaps you will see yourself in it. Once, a man came to a monastery trembling with fear. He confessed that he felt something terrible stirring inside, a darkness he could not name. The master of the monastery listened quietly, and then led the man into a courtyard where the sun shone on a patch of grass. The master said, "Watch the grass. Notice how it bends and sways with the wind, how it moves but does not resist, how it grows in places you might call imperfect. That is the nature of life. Your fear is the wind. Yourself is the grass." And there is a profound lesson in this story. Life is not about resisting what you fear, but allowing it to move through you. The self you dread is not a thing to vanquish, but a current to navigate. You will find that the more you allow it to be, the less frightening it becomes. Fear, after all, is only the mind's signal that you are approaching a territory of deep truth. To ignore the signal is to remain shallow, to skim the surface, to never enter fully into the richness of existence. Consider, too, the way we habitually fragment ourselves. We tell ourselves, this part is good, this part is bad, this is me, and this is something to reject. But when we do this, we create tension, we live in contradiction, and we suffer. The very act of division generates anxiety. And yet, if we step back and see that the bad parts are not outside of us, but inseparable from the whole, we begin to taste freedom. The snake no longer strikes because it no longer senses threat. The shadow no longer looms because it has been invited into the light. And in that invitation, there is peace. Practical experience shows us how to do this in everyday life. When jealousy arises, notice it, feel it, and trace its roots. It may tell you about a desire, a longing, or a need for connection. When rage wells up, do not lash out or suppress it. Feel it, observe it, and see what it reveals about your boundaries, your expectations, or your sense of justice. When shame surfaces, allow it to speak. Examine its origin, its message, and its context. In every case, the feared self is a teacher. It may be uncomfortable, it may be startling, it may even seem chaotic, but it is alive and it brings wisdom. And here is a subtle point that bears repeating. The self you fear is never truly a separate enemy. It is always the source of your vitality. To run from it is to run from life itself. To embrace it is to enter the stream of life fully, without reservation. The moment you stop labeling, stop judging, stop fleeing, the self relaxes, its energy flows, its vitality awakens, its creativity emerges. You discover abilities you never knew you had, pleasures you had denied yourself, and a sense of completeness you had thought impossible. Now, picture a river. The surface appears calm, serene, even predictable. But beneath, the waters swirl, eddy, crash over rocks, and leap into rapids. Most of us fear the turbulence. We want only the calm surface. But if we enter the river fully, if we allow ourselves to be carried by its current, we discover something extraordinary. The turbulence is not an obstacle, but the very mechanism of movement. Without it, the river would stagnate. In the same way, the feared self, the impulses, the anger, the desire, the despairs, the current of your life, propelling you forward, shaping your course, carving meaning into the landscape of your consciousness. And so, the invitation is clear. Stop fleeing. Stop resisting. Turn, instead, toward the self you have most feared. Greet it. Dance with it. Recognize it as the pulse of your being, as the music of your life, as the wind that bends the grass. In doing so, you do not become fearless. That is impossible. But you become intimate with your fear. You learn to move with it, to flow with it, to allow it to transform from shadow into illumination. And when you truly begin to inhabit this understanding, something remarkable occurs. You notice that the self you once feared is not constant. It changes, shifts, dances in ways that are utterly unpredictable. Like the wind, it cannot be grasped or confined. Like fire, it cannot be restrained without being extinguished. And yet, within its movement, there is a pattern, a rhythm, a voice that calls to the deepest part of you. To deny it is to deny music. To flee from it is to flee from your own heartbeat. The very thing you most dread is the source of your own vitality, the river that flows beneath the bridge of your everyday consciousness. There is a peculiar beauty in fear when it is embraced. Fear is no longer a threat. It becomes a teacher, a guide, a doorway. And the moment you stop fleeing, the moment you stop labeling your dark impulses as enemies, you begin to feel the intimacy of existence. It is like stepping into a forest at dawn, where mist curls around the trees and the birds begin to sing. At first, the forest seems mysterious, perhaps even frightening. But as you walk, as you open your eyes and ears, you discover that every shadow is alive. Every movement has meaning. Every sound is a voice calling you home. The feared self is the forest of your own soul. To enter it is to return to yourself. And yet, there is a subtle danger here. Many think that recognizing their feared self means surrendering to chaos, indulging impulses, abandoning morality, or giving themselves over to what society deems unacceptable. Nothing could be further from the truth. Recognition is not indulgence. It is awareness. It is seeing clearly, without judgment, without suppression, without fear. Like a gardener tending to a wild and unruly garden, you observe, you cultivate, you allow the natural growth of life to take its course. The weeds are not enemies. They are signals. The tangled branches are not obstacles. They are teachers. The feared self, when met with awareness, becomes a source of insight, not destruction. Consider, too, the way our culture encourages us to divide ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable parts. We are told to hide our desire, to suppress our rage, to deny our envy, and so we live fragmented, fractured lives, constantly at war with our own being. But the moment you stop this division, the moment you allow the feared self to exist without resistance, the fractures begin to heal. You see that the darkness is simply the other side of the light, that the chaos is the hidden order, that the impulses you resist are the energies that animate your life. In other words, wholeness is not about perfection. It is about recognition. It is about allowing all of yourself to be present, even the parts you once called monstrous. I often think of life as a cosmic dance, in which each movement, each step, each stumble is essential. And in this dance, the feared self is not a partner to avoid, but a partner to embrace. You cannot dance with one hand tied behind your back, nor can you fully participate if you deny half of your own body. The self you fear is the part that gives the dance depth, that adds the tension, the counterpoint, the rhythm that makes the music alive. To flee from it is to dance with a phantom, to move in a shadow, to play only half the song. To embrace it is to enter fully into the music of life, to become whole, to awaken. And so, the practice becomes clear, not avoidance, not suppression, not shame, but encounter. When fear arises, when jealousy circles, when rage or desire or despair knocks at your door, greet it. Attend to it. Listen. Ask what it wants to teach you. And then, with gentle recognition, allow it to flow, to move, to express itself within the boundaries of life. This is not easy. It is subtle, demanding, delicate, and yet it is the only way to live authentically, fully, and joyously. There is a secret here, hidden in plain sight. The more you face the self you fear, the less fear controls you. In the same way that fire is dangerous only when uncontrolled, fear loses its power when it is seen and acknowledged. The moment you allow yourself to encounter your shadow without judgment, without resistance, the moment you invite it to dance with you rather than against you, it transforms. It becomes energy, creativity, insight, vitality. And you discover, to your astonishment, that there was nothing outside of you to fear in the first place. The monster was never a stranger. The dark was never a void. The terror was your own life, your own aliveness, waiting to be recognized. And when you begin to live in this way, they are no longer enemies, but companions, messengers of your own vitality. It is as if you have been walking through a house full of locked doors, fearing what lies behind them, and suddenly you discover that the keys were always in your hand. And when you unlock the door and step inside, you realize the room was never a place of horror, it was a place of treasure, of insight, of life itself. Consider, for a moment, the way a forest grows after a fire. At first, there is only blackened trunks, ash, the smell of charred earth. It appears as though all life has been destroyed, and yet, beneath the destruction, beneath the fearsome devastation, seeds lie dormant, waiting for the heat to crack their shells. The very fire that seems catastrophic is the catalyst for new growth, new life, new possibility. In the same way, the parts of yourself you fear, the impulses and desires and emotions you have tried to deny, are the fertile soil of your own becoming. By facing them, by allowing them to speak, you cultivate the conditions for your own flowering. And so, you begin to understand that the self is not a static entity, but a living, breathing, flowing process. It is a river that carries both beauty and terror, both light and shadow, both creation and destruction. To fear it is to fear the river itself. To embrace it is to enter fully into the current, to feel its pull, to surrender to its movement. And in that surrender, to find freedom, there is no liberation in avoidance. There is only continued fragmentation, continued tension, continued suffering. Freedom arises when recognition replaces denial, when intimacy replaces separation, when acceptance replaces resistance. It is helpful to notice the small, everyday ways this plays out. Perhaps you encounter irritation with another person, a jealousy that flares in a quiet corner of your mind, a desire for something you believe you cannot have. The habitual response is to suppress, deny, judge, or blame. But if instead you pause and attend to the feeling, you see it clearly. You ask, what is this trying to tell me? What part of my life, what desire, what longing does it reflect? And in the very act of questioning, the fear begins to dissolve. You no longer react blindly. You respond consciously. The self you once feared becomes a guide, pointing toward a deeper understanding of yourself and of life. There is a story I sometimes recall. A man lived his life terrified of his own anger. He would seethe silently, bottle up his feelings, and avoid confrontation at all costs. One day, a friend told him, "Why do you run from the fire? Fire gives warmth as well as light. Why not learn to hold it without being consumed?" The man thought for a long time, and then, tentatively, he began to explore his anger, to feel it, to understand it. Slowly, he discovered that it was not a destructive force, but a signal, a vital energy that could protect, illuminate, and create. The moment he ceased to fear it, the energy transformed. It became a force of clarity, presence, and power. And in that transformation, he realized something profound. The self he had feared was never separate from him. It was his life, his strength, his vitality, waiting to be known. And so, the path emerges not as a heroic conquest, but as a quiet, persistent intimacy. Not as a battle to eliminate fear, but as a dance with it. Not as a war to suppress the self, but as a practice of recognition and integration. Each moment becomes an opportunity to see the self clearly, to meet it fully, to allow it to move through you without judgment. And in this ongoing engagement, something miraculous happens. You discover that fear, the very thing you once thought was your enemy, is the gateway to freedom. The shadow, the impulse, the desire, the rage, the envy, the shame, they are not outside you. They are you. And when you meet them with courage, curiosity, and compassion, you are no longer divided. You are whole. And when you begin to live in this wholeness, something astonishing begins to happen. Life itself seems to shift its rhythm, as though it had been waiting for you to notice a subtle harmony you had been missing. The fears that once loomed like storm clouds no longer dictate your actions. They become guides, gentle currents beneath the surface of your consciousness. You begin to realize that fear is never the enemy, it is the signal, the pulse, the heartbeat of life calling you to pay attention, to awaken, to participate fully. And the self you feared, the impulses you once suppressed, the desires you once judged, they are not strangers at the gate of your being. They are the keys, the instruments, the raw materials of your own aliveness. Think, for a moment, of a painter confronting a blank canvas. The painter fears making a mistake, smudging the color, applying the wrong stroke. And yet, every stroke, right or wrong, reveals something essential about the painting. In the same way, the self you fear is the brush, the color, the energy with which the masterpiece of your life is created. To suppress it is to leave the canvas empty, pale, lifeless. To embrace it is to allow the full palette of your being to emerge with all its nuances, contradictions, and brilliance. The fear itself becomes part of the artwork, the shadow a necessary contrast that makes the light visible. And here is a subtle, yet powerful truth. The more you engage with the self you fear, the more you realize that it was never truly fearful at all. Fear is a perception, a judgment, a lens through which you view the unknown within yourself. And when you shift your attention, when you lean toward rather than away, when you observe rather than suppress, the terrifying transforms into the familiar, the monstrous into the intimate, the unknown into the vivid reality of your own presence. The self you feared is not something to be vanquished. It is something to be recognized, welcomed, and, in a sense, Consider the metaphor of the storm. Most people flee from storms they see the wind, the rain, the thunder as enemies. And yet, if you stand in the storm, not resisting, not fleeing, you feel its power, its rhythm, its life force. You discover that the storm is not separate from you. It moves through you, around you, and sometimes, astonishingly, becomes part of you. The self you fear is a storm of this kind, a force of nature within your own consciousness. And to embrace it, even partially, is to discover your own power, your own aliveness, your own depth. And so, the practice of life becomes a dialogue rather than a battle. When anger arises, you do not deny it. You speak to it. When jealousy surfaces, you do not suppress it. You inquire into it. When despair knocks, you do not barricade yourself. You open the door and listen. And in this dialogue, something extraordinary happens. The self you feared begins to speak with clarity, to reveal its purpose, its meaning, its energy. It is no longer chaotic, no longer a shadow that terrifies, no longer a phantom that haunts. It becomes your companion, your guide, your teacher, your muse. And this recognition transforms your relationship with the world as well. You see others not as adversaries or mirrors of your fear, but as fellow travelers, each wrestling with their own shadows, each learning to dance with their own storms. Compassion arises naturally because you understand intimately the struggle of being human, the experience of living with a self that is complex, contradictory, and often frightening. You see that fear is not shameful. Anger is not evil. Desire is not corrupt. They are the very ingredients of life, and you begin to treat them and yourself with a gentle, reverent attentiveness. So the journey, it seems, is not toward an idealized, sanitized self. It is toward intimacy with your own being, intimacy with the impulses, the fears, the desires, the shadows that make you alive. Intimacy that allows the self you feared to reveal itself not as a monster, but as the vital, untamed, magnificent presence you have always been. And in this intimacy, you discover a freedom that no avoidance, no suppression, no fear could ever give you. The freedom to be fully yourself, without apology, without denial, without division. And as you continue to dwell in this awareness, you notice that life itself seems to mirror the acceptance you cultivate within. Events that once startled or disturbed, you no longer have the same power to They arrive, they move, they pass, like clouds across the sky, and you, having met the storm within, remain present, steady, and aware. The self you once feared has become a kind of compass, guiding you through the turbulence, illuminating the contours of your consciousness, reminding you that life is not a problem to be solved, but a movement to be danced with, moment by moment. Consider for a moment the way rivers flow. They do not resist the obstacles in their path. They do not curse the stones, the bends, the fallen trees. They move around, over, and sometimes through. And in so doing, they carve valleys, nourish forests, and sustain life. The self you fear behaves in the same way when you allow it to be. If you resist it, if you flee from it, it crashes against you, battering your sense of peace and stability. But if you attend, if you lean in, if you witness without judgment, it flows naturally, revealing its vitality, shaping your experience, sustaining the richness of your being. To embrace the feared self is not to be controlled by it. It is to recognize it as the river that nourishes all the landscapes of your inner world. And yet, even in embracing, there is humility. The feared self is vast, unpredictable, and often paradoxical. It may surprise you, challenge you, confront you with impulses you thought you had overcome or understandings you did not wish to face. And this is precisely why intimacy is necessary. For the moment we believe we have conquered our shadow, we create a new division, a new conflict, a new fear. The work is not conquest. It is relationship. It is dialogue. It is a perpetual witnessing, an ongoing listening, a patient, gentle attention to the movement of life within. There is a story, perhaps familiar, yet endlessly instructive. A monk sat beside a fire each evening, observing the flames. He noticed how the fire both consumed and illuminated, how it could be both warm and dangerous, how it could change form at every moment. And he understood that to approach the fire with fear alone was to be burned. To approach it with denial was to remain cold and dark. Only by observing, only by attending, only by entering into a relationship with the fire did he understand its nature. And so it is with the self you fear. The fire of anger, the flame of desire, the heat of envy, the spark of despair, they are not to be extinguished, nor are they to be feared. They are to be known, attended, and integrated. And when you integrate, you discover that fear itself loses its sting. The self that once seemed monstrous, chaotic, uncontrollable, becomes familiar, almost dear. You recognize its patterns, its rhythms, its messages. You begin to see that every impulse, every shadow, every instinct is part of a living, breathing ecosystem of your own consciousness. And in this recognition, there is a kind of joya, quiet, profound, radiant joy that arises not from control, not from mastery, not from conquest, but from relationship. You are no longer fragmented. You are no longer fleeing. You are whole. And with this wholeness comes creativity, spontaneity, and a deep sense of aliveness. For the self you feared is precisely the part that makes you human, that animates your imagination, that fuels your passions, that allows you to experience beauty, connection, and ecstasy. The moment you cease to resist it, you allow life itself to flow through you more freely. You become, in a very real sense, a channel for the energy of existence itself. And in this flow, fear is no longer an obstacle. It is a signpost, a guide, a reminder that you are alive, that you are present, that you are awake. So let us consider, finally, the remarkable irony of life. The very thing you have tried to flee, the self you have feared, is the only path to freedom. By running from it, you remain trapped in tension, division, and anxiety. By embracing it, you discover the pulse of your own vitality, the rhythm of your own creativity, the depth of your own being. And you realize that there was never anything outside of you to fear. The darkness, the chaos, the monstral were invitations. All were companions. All were your own life speaking to you, waiting for you to answer with courage, curiosity, and compassion. And now, as you begin to live with this recognition, something extraordinary becomes clear. The self you feared is not merely a part of you, it is the very essence of your aliveness. All the impulses you once called dangerous, all the desires you labeled shameful, all the anger, the envy, the longing, the despair, they are not intruders. They are the music of your being, the currents of the river in which you float, the flames that illuminate the night. To resist them is to deny life itself. To embrace them is to awaken to the fullness of your existence. Consider the moon reflected in a dark lake. At first glance, it seems separate from the water, a distant light shining upon it. But look closer. The reflection moves with the ripples. It dances with the waves. It is inseparable from the lake itself. And yet, the lake is also the sky, the clouds, the wind that stirs the surface. In the same way, the self you fear is both within you and inseparable from the totality of your being. It is not a fragment to be hidden, not a shadow to be banished, not a problem to be solved. It is the mirror in which you can see your own life fully, the reflection of the totality of yourself, shimmering, moving, alive. And so, the practice becomes one of radical intimacy. When fear arises, do not shrink. When desire emerges, do not suppress. When rage or envy or despair surfaces, do not instead turn toward them with gentle curiosity. Observe, listen, attend. Ask, what is this part of me trying to teach? What is it showing me about my needs, my longing, my energy, my aliveness? And in that simple, mindful attention, the self you feared begins to relax. It no longer needs to strike, to hide, to dominate. It becomes your partner, your guide, your teacher. And you begin to see something astonishing. That fear itself is not the enemy, but a doorway, a signal, a pulse of life calling you to awaken. There is a subtle point here, one that is often overlooked. Embracing the feared self does not make life safe. It does not eradicate pain, loss, disappointment, or confusion. Life continues to be unpredictable, turbulent, and sometimes terrifying, but it does make life intimate, alive, and profoundly meaningful. For when you stop running, when you stop suppressing, when you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts, you discover the full spectrum of your being, the entire palette of your existence, the richness of your aliveness. And in that discovery, you find a freedom that no amount of avoidance, control, or judgment could ever give you. And here is the final paradox. The self you most fear, the part of you you have tried to escape all your life, is not only your teacher, but your treasure. It is the source of courage, creativity, vitality, and love. It is the fire that illuminates your path, the current that moves you through life, the river in which your consciousness flows. And when you meet it fully, with openness and curiosity, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing it, and you stop fearing yourself. You become intimate with the fullness of your own being, and in that intimacy, you discover the joy of simply being alive. So, my friends, the invitation is clear. Do not flee. Do not suppress. Do not GVG. Turn toward the self you fear. Meet it. Listen to it. Dance with it. Allow it to move through you, to speak through you, to reveal itself in the richness of your life. And in doing so, you discover the astonishing truth. The self you feared was never separate from you. It was always you. It was always alive. And in embracing it, you awaken to the profound, unshakable, radiant reality of your own existence. And now, having walked this path inward, you begin to sense the profound simplicity of it all. Life is not about becoming someone else, nor is it about perfecting a self that never existed. Life is about meeting yourself fully, exactly as you are, in all your contradictions, all your fears, all your darkness, and all your light. The self you once feared, the parts you tried to hide or suppress, are not obstacles. They are the very ground upon which your life is built. They are the roots of your tree, twisting deep into the soil of being, unseen yet sustaining, dark yet fertile, tangled yet alive. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon at dawn. The mist rises slowly, revealing shapes, shadows, contours that you could not perceive in the dark. At first, you might tremble. The drop is great, the terrain uncertain. But as the sunlight touches the ridges, as the wind carries the scent of pine and earth, as the echo of birds drifts from below, you realize the canyon was never hostile. It was always magnificent. And in this realization, you see that your fear, too, was a kind of dawn, a signal that life was waiting to reveal itself to you, if only you had the courage to look. And here is where the meditation deepens into practice. In every moment, the self you fear will rise, in thoughts, in emotions, in impulses. And each time it does, do not turn away. Do not recoil. Instead, breathe. Notice. Allow it. Let it speak. And in that speaking, in that acknowledgement, you will find that it is not a stranger, not a phantom, not a monster. It is you. It is the life that flows through you, the energy that moves through you, the very spark of your consciousness expressing itself in form. And when you embrace it, you find an intimacy with life itself that is beyond words, beyond fear, beyond all attempts to control or judge. There is a subtle delight in this process, a quiet ecstasy, the kind of ecstasy that comes not from triumph over others, not from accumulation or conquest, but from the simple, profound act of recognition. To say to yourself, in a whisper or a shout, yes, I am here. You are here. And together we are alive. It is a moment of reconciliation, of grace, of awakening. The feared self, once a shadow looming over your existence, becomes the very light by which you see yourself, by which you move, by which you know that life is alive, vast, mysterious, and utterly beautiful. And when you walk in this recognition, you notice another miracle. The world itself softens. The edges of life blur. The harshness of judgment dissolves. You see the humanity in others because you have met the humanity within yourself. You perceive the beauty in contradiction, the wisdom in chaos, the music in the notes you once called wrong. And in this seeing, you realize the final lesson. There is no self outside of life, no fear outside of being, no separation between the shadow and the light. They are one. They are whole. They are you. So, my friends, rest now in this understanding. The self you fear is not an enemy, nor a fault, nor a flaw. It is the pulse of your own aliveness, the rhythm of your consciousness, the river beneath the bridge, the fire in the hearth, the wind in the forest. To meet it is not to be consumed. It is to awaken, to embrace. It is not to be reckless. It is to be whole. To listen to it is not to be defeated. It is to be free. And when you carry this awareness with you, quietly, steadily, in every thought, every breath, every movement, you discover the astonishing, unshakable truth. You are always, entirely, magnificently, the self you once feared. And in this knowing, there is peace. In this recognition, there is joy. In this intimacy, there is love. You are the shadow. You are the light. You are the music. You are the river. You are the fire. You are alive.